This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, I am Don Doroga Voronin of the Society for Creative Anachronism, specifically the East Kingdom. I'm discussing today one of the authors of this style of fencing, of Spanish fencing, called La Verdadera Destreza, or as I will refer to it, LVD, wrote about how to fight a certain style of weapon. My goals today are introduce the author, discuss the cultural reasons he might be writing about this, give my interpretation of the techniques themselves, and lastly, talk about the questions that I plan to look further into. The source is Luis Pacheco de Narvaez. Pacheco is one of the most prolific authors of LVD. This book that I'm discussing today was written in 1599 and is only the second book that was ever written on LVD, after the one by the founder Geronimo Carranza in 1569, which was published widely in 1582. I'm only looking at a small portion of this book, 9 pages or 6 plates, where Pacheco discusses how to fight someone with a curved blade that he calls the Alfanje. This is a Mediterranean saber, and based on the picture that you see here, he provides, and how other authors describe it, it was most probably what we call a falchion. The person he describes as wielding the weapon is referred to as a Turk or a Moor, and he uses these terms interchangeably. And there's a lot of baggage with him doing this, and I'll bring that up shortly. The reason behind him writing about this technique has many layers. First, there seems to be a fear in Christian Spain of either reinvasion by Muslims or rebellion by those that are still living there. Spain, as we know it today, had taken back the Iberian Peninsula in 1492, after several hundred years of fighting against primarily Muslims. This is only about 100 years before this book was written. Second, as late as 1571, Spain was still fighting the Ottoman Empire for control over the Mediterranean. The founder of the style, Carranza, actually participated in the suppression of a Morisco revolt between 1569 and 1570. The Moriscos were actually Muslims that were converted to Christianity, which goes back to the fear. And fourth, Pacheco actually claims to have fought the Turk before and has personal experience against this opponent. The response. Pacheco claims that the opponent is successful in wielding this weapon, quote, due to inconsideration and little wit of our men than for what they are capable, unquote. He is saying the opponent wasn't successful due to their skill or technique, but due to the Christian lack of knowledge. And, of course, Pacheco is taking it on himself to educate people with his book. He goes on to say that while the weapon might seem scary, the limitations are many. He claims they only have a single downward attack. They never attempt a first intent attack and only wait. And they have no thrust and lack blade length compared to the Spanish sword, being about 1/4 shorter than the Spanish blade. Now, I'm going to oversimplify and generalize here, but I think that's only fair as it's exactly what Pacheco did in his book. Almost every one of his 6 responses can be broken down into stay far enough away, know your range, feint, free the blade or disengage, and counter after time or after the attack. He goes into some items like how to close on angles in various directions, what happens if the opponent comes back up real fast, but the response still follows those same steps. Know your range, feint, free the blade, and counter after time. My analysis. The big question I want to investigate is what he wrote actually valid? First, was this written to sound impressive or was it an actual threat? Some evidence points that he might have just been writing it to gain social prestige in the royal court, rather than it being practical. Some of the writings of Pacheco's social enemies, such as a gentleman named Quevedo, at the time accuse him of doing just that. Racism. He uses the terms Moor and Turk to mean the same thing, and they are not the same culturally, but he groups them together as a single other. Moors were Muslim inhabitants of the Iberian Peninsula and were from a certain area, originally Morocco. Turks were supposedly from the Ottoman Empire. This generalization raises questions about his understanding of the enemy. Next, weapon. What type of weapon did the opponent actually use? It looks like a falchion, but other Mediterranean and Middle Eastern weapons had curved blades, like the shamshir, and they also might have been used in period, and again, he is grouping them together. Last, technique. His opponent only has one downward swinging strike. I want to look into the cultural fighting styles that used the curved blade in this period to see if that was true, as it really undervalues the enemy and goes back to him possibly trying to sound impressive rather than having true content. In summary, I am super excited by this material. With such a small passage, there is so much to look into in terms of techniques, as well as in terms of cultural exploration of the history of Spain, their opponents, the politics at the time, the weapons they used, the time period, and the lives of the people that lived there. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.